Hello, my name is Micah. I'm 30 years old. I live in Boise, Idaho, a city that's not too noisy but not as quiet as the small towns you see in movies. I work at a small accounting office handling numbers for local businesses. My job is like an endless loop: data entry, checking balance sheets, sending emails, and repeat. My life isn't much different from my work: simple, steady, and to many people's eyes, probably boring. But I don't complain. I like stability. I like knowing that tomorrow will be like today, no surprises, no risks. Yet deep down, I always feel an emptiness, as if I'm living a life that doesn't truly belong to me. Boise is a strange place. It has tree-lined streets, cozy coffee shops, and neighbors who always smile as you pass by. But it also has the coldness of a city trying to become something bigger, more modern. I live in a rented apartment in the West End, just big enough for a bed, a desk, and a few bookshelves filled with finance books I rarely open after graduating college. I live frugally not because I'm stingy, but because I always thought that one day I'd need that money for something big. I just don't know what that is yet. My family? Well, how do I put it? They're not like the families in toothpaste commercials, always beaming and hugging every weekend. My dad, Randall, is a tall man with a booming voice that makes you feel small. He's a real estate agent, but not the fancy kind with suits and ties. He's the type who'd convince you to buy a crumbling house with a friendly smile and a firm handshake. My mom, Cheryl, is the opposite: sharp, quick-witted, and always knows how to get what she wants for the family. She's a homemaker, but I suspect she runs the household better than Dad runs his deals. Then there's Zachary, my younger brother. Zach is 5 years younger than me, but it's like he was born to be the center of attention. He's tall, handsome, with blonde hair and a smile that makes people trust him instantly. Zach never lacks friends, plans, or apparently money. He does something related to digital marketing. I'm not entirely sure because every time I ask, he just grins and says, "You wouldn't get it, Micah. Let me handle it." My parents love Zach. No, love might be too mild a word. They worship him. To them, Zach is the sun, and I'm just a faint shadow standing behind him. I don't blame them. Not really. I'm used to being compared, mocked, and seen as the unambitious one. Dad often says to me right in front of Zach, "Micah, you need to learn from your brother. Look at him, seizing opportunities, making money, and you? Gonna stick to that desk job until you die?" Mom is gentler, but the way she sighs when I talk about my job is enough to make me want to shut up. "Micah, you need to live a little bigger. Look at Zach. He dares to dream big." I just nod, give a weak smile, and tell myself they don't mean any harm. They just don't understand me. But the truth is, no matter how much I try to act tough, their words cut me like tiny knives. I grew up in a house where love always came with conditions. If I got an A, Dad would pat me on the shoulder, but seconds later, he'd talk about how Zach was once honored by the whole school. If I saved up some money, Mom would smile, but then she'd ask if I was going to invest in Zach's latest startup idea. I'm not jealous of my brother, really, I'm not. Zach is a good guy in his own way, but I can't deny that in my heart there's an emptiness my family has never filled. I've never had a girlfriend. Not because I don't want one, but because I don't know where to start. I'm not the type to walk into a bar, strike up a conversation with a girl, and make her laugh like Zach does. I'm awkward, quiet, and maybe a bit shy. I once had a crush on a coworker named Monica. She had brown hair and bright eyes. She used to smile at me when we worked late together. But every time I thought about saying something, I'd think, what do I have to offer her? Just an ordinary accountant living an ordinary life. So I let the chance slip away, like I've let so many other things slip away in my life. But I'm not one to whine. I believe in working hard, living honestly, and keeping my promises. I always thought that if I just lived right, one day everything would fall into place. I was wrong. Everything started to change one Friday afternoon when I was driving home from work. Boise was slipping into autumn, the leaves on Warm Springs Avenue turning golden, and the air carrying a pleasant chill. I stopped at a small deli, grabbed a sandwich and a black coffee. It's my routine. eating alone, listening to finance podcasts and telling myself this life isn't so bad. But that day my phone buzzed. It was Mom. "Micah, come home. We need to talk to you," she said. Her voice was different, not the usual sarcasm, but something urgent. I frowned and replied, "Okay, I'll come right over." I didn't ask more, though a sense of unease started creeping up inside me. My parents' house is in the north end, a 2-story home with a neatly trimmed garden. It's where I grew up. But now, every time I step inside, I feel like a guest. When I pushed the door open, the smell of grilled meat wafted from the kitchen, and I heard Zach's laughter. He was telling some story as usual, making my parents crack up. I stood at the door, quietly taking off my shoes, wondering what I was doing here. "Micah, come in," Mom called from the dining room. I walked in and saw Dad sitting at the head of the table, a glass of red wine in hand. Zach was across from him, phone on the table, still chuckling. Mom stood up, gave me a quick hug, and pulled me to sit down. "Have you eaten?" "I made roast beef." "I already ate," I said, though the sandwich was still untouched in my car. "What did you call me for?" Dad set his glass down, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Micah, we want to talk about family. We should be closer, live together more. You know, your mom and I aren't getting any younger." I nodded, waiting. Dad isn't the type to talk about family bonds, so I knew something was coming. Then he continued, "We found a beautiful house in the suburbs, spacious, enough room for the whole family. But we need a little help from you." "Help how?" I asked, the unease growing stronger. Mom jumped in, her voice gentle but persuasive. "Micah, you know we're not exactly flush with cash. But you're good at saving, right? If you chip in with us, we can buy that house. We'll all live together like a real family." I glanced at Zach. He was scrolling through his phone, but I knew he was listening. "How much is the house?" I asked. Dad answered immediately. "It's $600,000 total. We've got $350,000. If you contribute $250,000, we can buy it. The house will be in my name, but don't worry, it's family property." $250,000. That was almost everything I'd saved over the past 10 years. I worked hard, skipped vacations, didn't buy fancy cars or eat at nice restaurants just to have that money. It was my safety net, my vague dream of a better future. I looked at Dad, then at Mom. They were smiling, but their smiles sent a chill down my spine. Zach looked up and shrugged. "It's a good opportunity, bro. We'll all live together. It'll be fun." I don't know why, but part of me wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe this was a chance for us to be a real family like I'd always longed for. I wanted to believe my parents needed me, that they valued me, so I nodded. "Okay, I'll contribute." Mom hugged me, Dad patted my shoulder, and Zach gave me a thumbs up like I'd done something amazing. But as I left their house that night, an emptiness gripped my chest. I told myself I was doing the right thing, that this was how I'd prove I was part of the family. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. A month later, I transferred $250,000 to Dad's account. The house was bought, and I got a text from Mom. "The house is beautiful, Micah." I felt relieved, even excited. I imagined family dinners, weekends with Mom, Dad, and Zach like a normal family. I started packing my things, gave up my apartment lease, and drove to the new house in the suburbs. The house was in a quiet area with maple trees glowing red in the afternoon sun. It was bigger than I'd imagined. 3 stories, a large garden, and a white picket fence. I knocked on the door, my heart racing. Mom opened it, but her smile wasn't as warm as before. "Micah, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice cold. I'm here to live with you like we talked about," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dad appeared behind her, his eyes sharp as knives. "Micah, this is our house. You don't get to live here. You contributed, sure, but that was to help the family. You can't just move in." I stood there, stunned, as if someone had punched me in the chest. "But you said it was for the whole family." I gave you all my savings. Mom cut me off. Micah, don't make this complicated. You're our son. Helping us is your duty. Now go home, don't cause trouble. What the hell is this? Did you trick me? I could barely contain my emotions. Dad answered calmly in a way that left me numb. This is our house. It's in my name. You have no rights here. Get out before I call the police. What happened next, I don't remember clearly. I just recall getting back in my car, gripping the steering wheel, tears streaming down my face that I couldn't stop. $250,000. 10 years of savings. 10 years of hope. All gone because I was too naive, too trusting of the people I called family. The days that followed passed in a haze. I lived in my old 10-year-old Honda Civic parked in a lot near Julia Davis Park. During the day, I still went to the office, typed on my keyboard, and responded to meaningless emails, but I was like a machine. My colleagues started noticing something was off. Monica, the brown-haired girl I once secretly liked, even asked, "Micah, are you okay? You look exhausted." I just gave a weak smile, shook my head, and said, "I'm fine, just having trouble sleeping." But I knew I wasn't fine. I had no home, no money, and worse, no trust left in anyone. At night, I curled up in the back seat of my car, draped in a thin blanket, listening to the wind whistle through the window cracks. I tried not to think about my parents, about Zach, about the house I'd poured my heart into. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's cold stare, my mother's sharp voice, and Zach's carefree smile, as if none of it had anything to do with him. I kept asking myself, how could they do this to me? How could they turn me into a homeless man in the very city I'd lived in my whole life? Then one morning, as I sat in my car, chewing on an expired protein bar and trying not to sink into despair, a knock on the window startled me. I looked up to see a man standing outside. He was about 60, with silver hair, wearing a worn gray suit, but his eyes were sharp, as if they could see through every secret. I rolled down the window, wary. "Micah?" he asked, his voice deep and steady. "Who are you?" I replied, my hand instinctively gripping the car keys, ready to drive off at any moment. "I'm a private investigator," he said, handing me a thick business card that read, "Private Investigation Services, Robert Klein. Someone wants to meet you. They say it's important." I took the card, staring at it as if it held the answers to the chaos in my mind. "Who wants to meet me?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "And why?" Klein shrugged, but his eyes never left mine. "I don't know the details. I was hired to find you and bring you to them. They're in Missoula, Montana. If you want, I'll take you there. If not, I'll report back that you declined." Missoula, Montana. Over 400 miles from Boise. I'd never been there, and I had no reason to trust a stranger who appeared out of nowhere. But then I looked around, at the cramped car, the scattered food wrappers, and my life now reduced to a few square feet. I had nothing left to lose. "Okay," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'll go." The journey to Missoula was a long, silent one. I followed Klein's black SUV down endless highways, through lush pine forests and misty mountains. My mind swirled with 100 questions. Who wanted to meet me? Why in such a faraway place? And why hire a private investigator to find me? I thought of my parents, but quickly dismissed the idea. If it was them, they wouldn't need to go to such lengths. They'd already gotten what they wanted from me. When we reached Missoula, dusk was settling in. The first lights of the city twinkled in the distance, but Klein led me down narrow dirt roads, far from the city center. The landscape grew wilder. Expanses of grasslands dotted with old wooden fences and scattered lonely houses. Finally, we stopped in front of a large iron gate, beyond which a road led to a sprawling ranch. A wooden sign hanging above the gate read Willow Creek Ranch. Klein motioned for me to get out of the car. "Go in," he said. "They're waiting. My job's done." Then he drove off, leaving me alone in front of the gate. I took a deep breath and pushed the iron gate open. The hinges creaked like a warning. The gravel path to the ranch was flanked by towering pine trees, their resinous scent filling the air. In the distance, I saw warm light spilling from a large log house, smoke curling lazily from the chimney. My heart beat faster. I didn't know what I was walking into, but this feeling, part fear, part curiosity, was the only thing that made me feel alive in weeks. As I approached the house, the front door opened. An elderly woman stepped out, her silver hair tied neatly back, her bright blue eyes gleaming under the porch light. She wore a thick sweater and jeans, but something about her told me she was more than just an ordinary farmer. "Micah?" she called, her voice warm but trembling, as if she'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Yes," I replied, my voice faltering. "Who are you?" She smiled, but it was a smile tinged with pain. "I'm Eleanor, your grandmother." She paused, looking at me as if memorizing every feature of my face. "And this is your home, if you want it." I froze, as if someone had slapped me hard across the face. My grandmother? I'd never met my grandparents. My father always said they died when I was young. I didn't even have a photo of them, no stories, no memories. "But Dad said you were dead," I stammered. A man appeared behind Eleanor. He was tall, lean, with a weathered face and eyes as sharp as Klein's, but with a gentleness I couldn't quite explain. He wore a flannel shirt and held a wooden cane. "Micah," he said, his voice deep and steady. "I'm Walter, your grandfather, and we have a lot to talk about." My grandparents' house was a magical place in a way I couldn't describe. It wasn't luxurious, but it was warm and alive. The wooden walls were covered with paintings and family photos, but none of my father, mother, or Zach. The living room had a large fireplace above which an antique clock ticked steadily. The smell of freshly baked bread and potato soup wafted from the kitchen, making me realize how hungry I was. They led me to the dining table where a hearty meal was laid out: beef stew, homemade bread, and a salad with fresh garden vegetables. I sat down, but my mind was still reeling. Why are you finding me now?" I asked, unable to hold back. "Dad said you were dead. Why did he lie?" Eleanor placed her hand on mine, her warm, trembling touch grounding me. "Micah, my dear boy, I'm so sorry. Your grandfather and I have been looking for you for years, but we didn't know where you were. Randall, your father, he cut off all contact with us over 20 years ago." Walter cleared his throat, his eyes darkening. "Micah, there are things you need to know. But first, eat. You look like you're about to collapse." I wanted to protest, to demand answers right then, but the sincerity in their voices silenced me. I ate, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was truly alive. The meal wasn't just food, it was care, the kind of affection I'd longed for. After dinner, we sat by the fireplace. Walter began to speak, his voice low and heavy with pain. "Micah, your father, Randall, was once a son we loved dearly. But he changed. 25 years ago, when we still lived in Idaho, Randall deceived us. He said he needed money to start a business, to build a future for the family. We trusted him. We gave him our entire retirement savings, nearly $400,000, and the house we'd lived in our whole lives. But then Randall disappeared. He didn't repay a cent, didn't offer a single explanation. We lost everything." I sat there, stunned. The pieces of my life started falling into place. My father, the man I'd always tried to please, to prove myself worthy to, was a con artist. The $250,000 I'd given for the family house was just another of his schemes. "So why now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why find me now?" Walter smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Because we didn't want to lose you again. We hired a detective to track you, Zach and Randall. When we heard Randall had tricked you into buying that house, I immediately asked Klein to bring you here." Eleanor squeezed my hand tightly. "Micah, stay with us. You don't have to go back to Boise. You don't have to face them anymore. This is your home." I looked into her eyes, and for the first time in my life, I felt a sincerity I'd never gotten from my parents. But at the same time, anger surged within me. Anger at my parents, at Zach, at myself for letting them use me. And above all, I felt a spark of hope, small, fragile but enough to make me want to stay. "I'll stay," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "But I want to know everything. I want to understand why things turned out this way." Walter nodded. "You will, Micah. But first, rest. Tomorrow we'll start anew." That night I lay in the bed Eleanor had prepared for me. It was simple, with a thick wool blanket and a window overlooking the fields. The sound of crickets outside was like a lullaby, but I couldn't sleep. My mind still swirled with questions. The next morning, the smell of coffee and toast pulled me out of bed. I walked down the creaky wooden stairs, each step groaning under my weight. Eleanor was in the kitchen, wearing a green apron, stirring a pot of oatmeal. Walter sat at the dining table, reading a financial newspaper, his glasses perched low on his nose. The scene was so ordinary it felt surreal, like I'd stepped into a family portrait I'd never been part of. "Good morning, Micah," Eleanor said, smiling. "Did you sleep well?" "I'm not used to it," I replied, sitting at the table. "But thank you, Grandma. The room is cozy." Walter folded his newspaper and looked at me over his glasses. "Good. Today we begin. Are you ready?" "Ready for what?" I asked, a bit confused. He smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "For your new life. You've lost too much, Micah. It's time to take back what's yours." I didn't know what he meant, but his gaze, sharp, determined, sparked something in me. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a failure. I nodded, though I still didn't fully understand. "I'm ready." The first days at Willow Creek Ranch were a journey of discovery. The ranch was larger than I'd imagined, with sprawling grasslands, a small horse stable, and a vegetable garden that Eleanor tended with care. Walter showed me every corner, the area where he raised chickens, the small pond where he stocked fish, and an old shed filled with books and financial documents. "This is where we rebuilt everything," he said, pointing to the shelves. "After Randall took everything, your grandmother and I learned to stand on our own. Not for money, but because we refused to let others dictate our lives. I began to understand why they chose to live secluded here, far from Boise, far from painful memories. The ranch wasn't just a home, it was their fortress, a place where they reclaimed themselves. And now, they wanted me to do the same. Every morning after breakfast, Walter took me to the shed, which he called the classroom. There, he taught me about investing. Not the dry theories I'd learned in school, but practical lessons forged from decades of experience. He spoke about stocks like a storyteller recounting adventures. "Each stock is a story, Micah," he said. "You need to understand the company, the people behind it, and why it's worth something. Don't just look at numbers, look at the dream." I was amazed by his knowledge. He wasn't just a farmer, he was a brilliant investor who'd turned small earnings from the ranch into a substantial portfolio. He taught me how to read financial statements, analyze market trends, and most importantly, stay calm when things fell apart. "The market is like life," he said. "It'll test you, but if you keep a cool head, you'll win." Eleanor, meanwhile, taught me different lessons. She showed me how to grow vegetables, care for horses, and find joy in small things. Every afternoon, we sat on the porch, sipping tea and talking. She told me about her and Walter's younger days, their life in Boise, and the dreams they once had. "I never blamed Randall," she said one evening as the sunset painted the horizon red. "But I wish we'd found you sooner, Micah. You deserve to be loved." Her words warmed my heart. For the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Here, with my grandparents, I didn't need to prove myself. I didn't need to be Zach or live big or dream big. I just needed to be me. Time passed like a breeze. I learned faster than I expected. Walter's lessons weren't just about money. They were about seeing the world, seizing opportunities, and not letting the past define the future. I started investing, beginning with small amounts from the money my grandfather gave me. He guided me to choose safe but promising stocks like renewable energy and medical technology companies. "Don't chase trends," he reminded me. "Look for what lasts." Within a year, I made my first profit. Not much, just a few $1,000s, but it was the first time I felt I could achieve something big. I grew bolder, investing in small real estate deals in Missoula under Walter's guidance. I bought a small plot near the ranch, planning to build a storage shed for produce. "You're learning to build," Walter said, patting my shoulder. "Not just money, but a future." Life at the ranch changed me. I was no longer the timid accountant who bowed under my family's mockery. I was stronger thanks to days working in the fields. I was more confident thanks to evenings talking with my grandparents. And most importantly, I was happier. I started to dream, not about pleasing my parents, but about a life I could be proud of. 3 years later, I barely recognized myself. From a broke man living in his car, I'd become a successful investor. My portfolio was now worth over $1 million thanks to Walter's strategies and a bit of luck. I decided to return to Boise, not to confront my family, but to start a new chapter. I founded a small investment fund focused on tech and clean energy startups. I rented a small office in downtown Boise, hired a team of a few people, and got to work. The media took notice. An article in the Boise Business Journal called me an emerging star in the investment world. Financial magazines invited me for interviews and startups lined up for funding. I answered questions carefully, avoiding mention of my family. When a journalist asked about my background, I simply said, "I grew up in Boise, but I learned the most from the people who gave me a second chance." That was my way of honoring my grandparents without revealing the secret of Willow Creek Ranch. My success in Boise, while it filled me with pride, also brought a strange feeling. I had come a long way from the days of living in my car, from those cold nights with only the sound of the wind for company. But every time I looked in the mirror, I still saw traces of the old Micah, the timid accountant always trying to please others. I wondered if I had truly escaped my past or if it was just waiting for the right moment to pull me back. And then my past did return, in the form of my parents and Zach. One Wednesday morning, as I was reviewing financial reports in my office, my phone buzzed. The screen showed Mom's number. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the decline button, but I answered. "Micah, my boy." Her voice came through so sweet it gave me goosebumps. "I heard you're doing really well. Your dad and I are so proud of you." I stayed silent, waiting. I knew she wasn't calling just to praise me. "What do you want, Mom?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. She paused, then sighed as if I'd hurt her feelings. "Micah, why would you say that? We just want to see you, to talk like a family. You're so busy, we barely have time together anymore." "I'm busy," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "If you have something to say, just get to the point." "All right," she replied, her voice turning serious. "Your dad and I are getting old, Micah. We don't have much time left. We just need a little help, a small amount to live more comfortably. And Zach, your brother, he's working on a big startup project. He needs your support." I let out a dry laugh, not out of amusement, but because I couldn't believe their audacity. "Mom, I gave you and Dad $250,000 3 years ago. And what did I get? A night sleeping in my car. You took all my savings. I don't owe you anything anymore. Don't bother me again." As soon as I finished, Mom started crying, but I knew it was an act. "Micah, you can't turn your back on family. We're your blood. You're so successful now. Can't you help us just a little?" I hung up, my heart pounding. But that was just the beginning. In the days that followed, my parents and Zach started showing up everywhere. One afternoon, as I was eating a sandwich at a cafe near my office, Zach walked in, his smile as dazzling as ever, as if we'd never had a falling out. "Hey, Micah, long time no see," he said, sitting across from me without asking. "I heard your investment fund is making waves. I'm proud of you, man." "Zach, get to the point." I cut him off, not bothering to look up from my plate. "What do you want?" He shrugged, feigning hurt. "Why so cold, bro? I just wanted to apologize for the house thing. I didn't know Mom and Dad would do that. But you're doing fine now, right? I've got a startup idea, just need $50,000 to get it off the ground. Can you help me out?" I looked straight into Zach's eyes. He was still handsome, still had that smile that made people want to trust him, but I wasn't the Micah from 3 years ago. "Zach, You know why I don't trust you. I don't owe you, and I'm not giving you any money. Zach narrowed his eyes, his smile fading. You've changed, Micah. You think you're better than us just because you've got money now? Mom and Dad were right. You're ungrateful. He stood up and left, but his eyes, a mix of anger and greed, sent a chill down my spine. My parents were worse. They started showing up at my office, standing in the lobby, demanding the receptionist let them see me. One time, Dad showed up in a worn-out suit, his hair disheveled, but his eyes as sharp and cold as the day he kicked me out of the suburban house. Micah, get out here and talk to me, he shouted, making my employees exchange nervous glances. I led him outside, trying to stay calm. I raised you, put you through school, and this is how you treat me? He said, jabbing a finger into my chest. Who do you think you are? Some self-made millionaire? I'm your father, Micah. You don't get to turn your back on me. I gave you and Mom $250,000, I replied, my voice trembling with anger. I lost everything. You have no right to ask for more. He smirked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. $250,000? You think that's enough? You've got millions now, Micah. Don't be stingy with your family. I turned away, refusing to respond. But every time they showed up, I felt myself being dragged back into the dark hole of my past. I tried to keep my distance, but out of some lingering sense of duty or maybe weakness, I agreed to send them $2,000 a month. I thought it would make them stop, that it would buy me peace. I was wrong. Things got worse one evening when I got a call from Eleanor. Her voice over the phone was still gentle, but this time I heard a tremor I hadn't noticed before. Micah, she said, hesitating, your parents came to the ranch last week. I froze, feeling as if someone had doused me with ice water. What did they do there? I asked, my voice hoarse. She sighed, her voice heavy. They found out we're here. You mentioned the ranch in an interview and they tracked us down. They stood at the gate yelling, demanding to see me and your grandfather. Randall said we owed him, that we were hiding assets, that he had a right to take back what's his. Cheryl tried to sweet-talk us, saying they just wanted to reconcile the family. But I know they only want money. I gripped the phone tightly, anger rising like a wildfire. I remembered the Boys Business Journal interview where I'd carelessly mentioned the ranch in Missoula as my inspiration. I thought it was a small detail, a way to honor my grandparents. I never imagined it would lead my parents to their doorstep. What else did they do? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. Your grandfather went out and told them to leave, Eleanor said, her voice trembling. He stood at the gate, holding his cane, saying they weren't allowed in. Randall shouted, called your grandfather a liar, said he abandoned him. Cheryl stood behind crying, saying they just wanted us to make peace. They stayed for hours, Micah, until it got dark. Your grandfather had to call the local police to make them leave. Did the police do anything? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. No, she said, her voice dropping. They just told your parents to leave, but there was nothing serious enough to arrest them for. But they haven't stopped, Micah. They call every day, send letters to the ranch. Yesterday, I got a letter from your mother saying if we don't give them money, they'll make a big deal out of it. I don't know what they're planning, but I'm worried. Your grandfather, he's not as strong as he used to be. I'm afraid they'll do something to hurt him. I sank into my chair, feeling like the world was crumbling again. The image of Walter, the man who taught me to rise from ashes, being harassed by my parents, was unbearable. Grandma, I said, my voice trembling but resolute, I'll come back to Missoula this weekend. I'll handle this. I promise. Eleanor was silent for a moment, then said, Micah, be careful. I don't want you to get hurt again. I hung up, stood and looked out my office window. Boise's streetlights flickered, but they no longer felt safe. I knew this battle wasn't over. My parents and Zach had caught the scent of money, not just from me, but from my grandparents too. And when greed drove them, they wouldn't stop, not for family ties, but for their own selfishness. I decided to hire a lawyer to explore legal options. I wanted to protect my grandparents, but the lawyer said that unless my parents or Zach did something clearly illegal, we couldn't do much beyond a restraining order. "They're clever," the lawyer said. "They know the limits of the law and are exploiting them." The feeling of helplessness made me want to scream. I'd built a new life, a future I once thought impossible, but my family still found ways to drag me back into the darkness. I began to realize that no matter how successful I became, they would never leave me alone. They didn't see me as a son or a brother. They saw me as a cash machine. On Friday evening, I started packing my things in my small Boise apartment. A small suitcase, a few sets of clothes, and a notebook where I'd jotted down Walter's investment lessons. I was checking my car, making sure the tank was full and the tires were good when my phone buzzed. The screen showed Eleanor's name. I smiled, thinking she was calling to ask if I'd eaten dinner or to remind me to bring a jacket because Missoula was getting cold. "Micah," her voice came through, trembling and panicked. "Your grandfather. He's been in an accident. His truck crashed into a tree on the way to town. He's in the Missoula hospital in critical condition. Can you come right away?" I felt the blood drain from my body, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. "An accident? How is he, Grandma?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I don't know, Micah," Eleanor choked out. "The doctors say he has severe head trauma. They're trying to save him, but I'm so scared. Please come quickly." I don't remember how I responded. I only remember throwing my suitcase into the back seat, jumping into the car, and speeding off. The drive from Boise to Missoula had never felt so long. 400 miles over 6 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. I floored the gas pedal, racing down dark highways, my headlights cutting through misty pine forests. Images of Walter flashed in my mind, him smiling as he taught me to read financial statements, patting my shoulder when I made my first profit, standing on the porch with his wooden cane telling stories of his youth. I couldn't lose him. Not now, not when I'd just found him. When I reached the Missoula hospital, it was late. The hallways were cold, reeking of antiseptic. I found Eleanor in the waiting room, her trembling hands clutching a handkerchief. She looked smaller than ever, her face pale, her eyes red and swollen. When she saw me, she stood and hugged me tightly, but I could feel the desperation in her embrace. "Grandma, how is he?" I asked, though part of me dreaded the answer. Eleanor shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Micah, your grandfather. He didn't make it. The doctors said he had severe brain trauma. They did everything they could, but he passed away an hour ago." I stood frozen as if the world had collapsed. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, that's not possible. I talked to him yesterday. He was going to teach me about hedge funds." Eleanor took my hand, her voice choked with grief. "I know, my boy. I don't want to believe it either, but he's gone. He went peacefully, Micah. He loved you so much." I sank into a chair, my mind blank. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurting, but because the pain was so immense I didn't know how to process it. I just held Eleanor, letting her cry on my shoulder, trying to be her anchor even as I was breaking inside. The image of Walter, the man who gave me a home, a real family, was now just a memory. I felt like a piece of my soul had been torn away, and I didn't know how to fill that void. In the days that followed, I stayed at Willow Creek Ranch helping Eleanor arrange the funeral. We held a small ceremony right at the ranch, Walter's favorite place. Only a few neighbors, some old friends of my grandparents, and I attended. I stood before his grave, a simple stone slab inscribed with Walter Grayson, husband, father, teacher. I placed a bouquet of white daisies on it, the flowers he once said Eleanor loved most. I wanted to say something, to thank him for everything, but my throat tightened and I just stood there silently, letting the wind carry my unspoken words. But amid the grief, a suspicion began to gnaw at me. Walter's accident didn't seem as straightforward as it appeared. He was a careful man, especially when driving. His old truck, though not new, was always well maintained. I recalled Eleanor's story about my parents showing up at the ranch days before, harassing them, demanding money. I didn't want to believe they could do something so horrific, but the doubt grew, like a storm brewing in my chest. I contacted the Missoula police, asking them to investigate further. They examined the scene, took statements, and inspected the truck. After a week, they concluded it was a traffic accident. No signs of tampering, no evidence of foul play. He might have been distracted, one officer said. Or there could have been a minor mechanical issue. These things happen often. I didn't accept that answer. I hired a private investigator in Missoula, someone experienced with suspicious accidents. I took him to the scene where Walter's truck had crashed into a large tree on a dirt road leading to town. The investigator examined everything meticulously, taking photos and collecting samples from the vehicle. After 2 weeks, he returned with a report. There's no clear evidence of sabotage. The brakes worked and there's no sign anyone tampered with the engine. But he hesitated. There's something odd. A security camera from a nearby ranch recorded a strange car parked near the scene the night before the accident. I couldn't identify the owner, but it looked a lot like your father's car. My heart pounded. My father? What was he doing there? The investigator shrugged. I don't know. The camera only caught the car, not the driver. There's no direct evidence to accuse anyone. He might have just been passing through. But I didn't believe it was a coincidence. I called my father, my voice shaking with anger. What were you doing in Missoula the night before Grandpa's accident? I asked bluntly. He laughed coldly over the phone. You're crazy, Micah. I just went to visit to talk to my parents. You think I'm some kind of monster? I didn't do anything. I hung up, but the suspicion didn't fade. I knew my parents and Zach had been harassing my grandparents, putting pressure on Walter as his health weakened. Even without direct evidence, I was convinced his death wasn't random. They may not have caused the accident directly, but their greed and selfishness had pushed him to his limit. I looked at Eleanor, now a shadow of herself, and swore I wouldn't let them hurt her. After the funeral, I stayed at the ranch trying to comfort Eleanor. Every evening, she sat by the fireplace, clutching a framed wedding photo of her and Walter, her eyes staring into the distance. He loved you, Micah, she said once, her voice choked. He always said you were his pride, the reason he kept fighting. I held her hand, fighting back tears. I know, Grandma, and I won't let him down. I'll protect you, protect what you and Grandpa built. But that promise weighed heavily on me. Every time I looked at Eleanor, I saw the pain in her eyes, not just from losing Walter, but from the old wounds my parents had caused, now reopened by their bottomless greed. I knew that if I didn't act, my parents and Zach would keep harassing us, keep trying to destroy what little was left of the real family I had. Willow Creek Ranch, once my sanctuary, now felt like a fortress under siege. I had to do something, not just to protect Eleanor, but to free us both from the shadows of the past. In the weeks following the funeral, I stayed in Missoula, taking care of Eleanor and managing the ranch. I tried to keep things as Walter had, fixing fences, tending to the horses, checking the vegetable garden. But every corner of the ranch reminded me of him. The wooden chair where he used to sit reading the financial newspaper, the cane he leaned on when showing me the fields, the shed filled with books where he taught me my first investment lessons. Each memory was a stab, but also a reminder that I had to be strong for him, for Eleanor, and for myself. Eleanor, though devastated, tried to stay strong. She began teaching me Walter's favorite dishes, as if cooking was her way of keeping him alive. He loved my potato soup the most, she said, a sad smile crossing her face as she stirred the pot on the stove. He always said I made it better than any restaurant. I sat with her listening, but inside I was planning. I knew that staying in Missoula, though peaceful, wasn't a long-term solution. My parents and Zach were still out there, and I couldn't let them keep threatening our lives. I started making plans. First, I met with a lawyer in Missoula who specialized in estates and trusts. I wanted to ensure the ranch and my grandparents' investments were protected. The lawyer suggested transferring the assets into a trust with Eleanor and me as beneficiaries. That way, if anyone tries to contest it, they can't touch it, he said. I agreed immediately. I didn't want my parents or Zach to have any chance of claiming anything from my grandparents. Next, I reviewed my investment portfolio. Thanks to Walter's lessons, I had accumulated over $2 million from stocks, real estate, and my investment fund in Boise. I knew that this money, combined with my grandparents' assets, was enough for us to start over somewhere new. But I didn't want to just run away. I wanted to build a meaningful life, one Walter would be proud of. I sat down with Eleanor and shared my idea. "Grandma," I said, my voice trembling, "I think we should leave here. Not because I want to abandon the ranch, but because I want to protect you. My parents and Zach won't stop. I want to take you somewhere they can't find us, where we can live in peace." Eleanor looked at me, her eyes glistening with tears. "Micah, I don't want to leave this place. It's where your grandfather and I rebuilt everything, but..." She paused, taking a deep breath. "If it's the way to keep you safe, to protect what your grandfather left behind, I'll go." I took her hand, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "I promise, Grandma. We'll find a new place, somewhere we can be happy." After many sleepless nights, I decided Europe would be our destination. I'd read about small coastal towns in Italy and France, where life was slow, peaceful, and no one would know who we were. I contacted an immigration consultant asking about options in Italy. They suggested a small town called Positano on the Amalfi Coast, with cobblestone streets, pastel-colored houses, and shimmering blue seas. "It's like a painting," the consultant said. "Hardly anyone will find you there." I began selling assets. First was Willow Creek Ranch. I didn't want to let it go, but I knew keeping it would only invite more harassment from my parents and Zach. A young family in Missoula bought the ranch, promising to care for it as my grandparents had. I sold my stake in the Boise investment fund, handed operations to my team, and transferred my investments to a European account. Each step felt like cutting away a piece of my past, but also like gaining more freedom. As I expected, my parents and Zach didn't sit still. When they heard I was selling the ranch, they showed up in Missoula, standing at the gate, yelling to see me. "Micah, you can't do this," my father roared over the phone when I refused to meet him. "That's family property. You have no right to sell it." "Family?" I replied, my voice calm but icy. "You and Mom took everything I had. I don't owe you anything." They sent threatening letters, called incessantly, even tried contacting my lawyer, but I was prepared. The trust protected my grandparents' assets, and my lawyer ensured my parents had no legal claim to anything. For the first time, I felt I was taking back control. Finally, on an autumn morning, Eleanor and I left Missoula. We flew to Italy, landing at Naples Airport, then drove to Positano. The small town appeared like a dream, houses stacked on cliffs, the Mediterranean Sea sparkling under the sun, and the air fragrant with lemon and flowers. I rented a small house on a hill with a terrace overlooking the sea. Eleanor, though still carrying the pain of losing Walter, began to smile more. "Your grandfather would love this place," she said one day as we sat on the terrace sipping lemon tea. "I started a small online financial firm in Italy focusing on sustainable investments. I didn't need fame or attention. I just wanted to continue what Walter taught me in my own way." I also began a project I knew he'd be proud of, a small affordable nursing home in Positano for elderly people with no family. I named it Willow House, in honor of the ranch and Walter. Eleanor got involved, designing the garden and teaching the residents to bake bread. "This is how we keep him alive," she said, and I nodded, tears silently falling. One afternoon, I sat on a wooden chair on the terrace, watching the waves ripple against the shore. The breeze carried the scent of salt and flowers, and I felt a peace I'd never known. I thought about my journey, from a broke accountant living in his car in Boise, to a man who found a real family in Missoula, and now a free man in Positano. I thought about my parents and Zach, probably still out there scheming to extract money from anyone they met. But they no longer mattered. They couldn't touch me. couldn't touch Eleanor, couldn't touch what Walter had left behind. I whispered softly, as if Walter could hear, "If a family can't give you love, don't let it hold you hostage." I learned that forgiveness can't be forced. I didn't forgive my parents or Zach, not because I didn't want to, but because they never offered a sincere apology. I learned that not every blood tie is worth keeping. Sometimes real family is the people who choose to love you, like Walter and Eleanor. I learned that bad people may escape legal punishment, but they lose the most precious thing, the trust and affection of good people. And above all, I learned that true success isn't about revenge, it's about freedom. I looked out at the sea where the sun was setting, painting the horizon a brilliant orange. I knew that no matter how painful the past was, I had found my path, and I would never let it be taken away again.